Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1207A, and today's date is February 17th, 2017, and the title of the episode is The Economy is an Illusion. Look past the illusion, and you will see the crisis. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, yesterday, Trump had a news conference, and there were many things that were said about the media and things like that. But something very interesting that he came out and said is that the economy is a mess. Now, think about this for a second. The economy is a mess. Just a day before, we had Janet Yellen out there saying that the economy is disappointing, it is getting weaker, and then she came out with the phrase, and you just don't blame the Fed if things start to fall apart. So when we start putting this together, we're starting to see what is going on here. We had Mario Draghi saying if Trump puts his policies forward, his economic policies, and the economy starts to deteriorate, well, that's because of what he's doing. We had Fitch saying the same thing, Christine Lagarde, and what we're starting to see right now is the truth is starting to come out. The illusion that we've been under for such a long time is starting to break away. And we are seeing that the economy is not what they've been telling us. Remember, the corporate media, the governments, the central banks around the world, they're not working in the best interest of the people. They are working in the best interest to their masters. And what we've been tracking is the lead up. Well, actually, it is the collapse scenario. Because behind all the scenes, behind all the headlines of the corporate media, behind the stock market, behind all of this is the truth. And that's what's coming out right now. And for some people, they've been living a nightmare. Actually, if you look at some of the stats, you see about 93 million plus people have been living a nightmare. And that is about to spread. And you have to remember, the majority of the people leading up to 2008 thought that everything was perfectly fine. There was no problems whatsoever. They believed what the corporate media was saying. They believed that the economy was doing well. They believed the central bank when they said we're not forecasting a recession. There were a few out there who were saying there are major problems coming. We've been tracking this. We've been looking at it. Just like those individuals that looked at the subprime securities. They just didn't look at the AAA rating. They went inside of them and they said, let me take a look here. Are these as strong as they're telling us? And when they looked inside, they saw default, subprime people taking these mortgages out, and it was all wrapped up in a nice bow, and it looked fantastic. Now, they looked at the hard truth. No one wanted to believe them. Everyone laughed at them. Everyone thought they were crazy. And all those other people, the majority of the people, hundreds of millions of people, were like, everything is fine. There's no problems here. You had certain individuals out there saying, no, the credit market's going to freeze up. The subprime securities, that's going to be a disaster. We're going to have a real estate problem. Housing prices are going to come down. They were laughed at. They said, when is this going to happen? You told us this in 2006. You told us this in 2007. And so on and so on. And here we are today. Those same people are saying the same exact things. Looking past the illusion. Looking at the truth. And this new president that is in office is telling us the economy is a mess. Now, he could say, look, hey, the economy, it's okay. We're going to make it better. He didn't say that. He said it's a mess. Janet Yellen, after years of telling us that the economy is getting stronger, labor market looks good, all of a sudden, it's weakening. Really? No, what's happening right now is we're heading down a period of time where the truth is coming out. The illusion is disappearing. And for some, they've been living this economic nightmare for years. And just because they're working at a part-time job doesn't mean that everything is fine with them. Because at one time, until you experience it, at one time where maybe they had this great full-time job and they couldn't find a full-time job, so they had to take 1 or 2 part-time jobs. They lost their house, they lost their car, they're living in an apartment, they're barely scraping by. They're living in a different type of nightmare compared to a person who cannot find work at all. So people are all at different levels. What Obama did during this period of time is he gave people government money so they wouldn't complain about what was happening. Here, go on food stamps. Here, go on welfare. Here, be subsidized in health care. That's what the government was doing. They bring you in and make you dependent on them, and you can't say a word, or guess what? That flow of money stops. Now what the central bankers want to do is they want to start universal basic income. Why do they want to do this? If the economy is so strong, why do they want to give money to everyone? To control them, to keep them quiet, so they can keep going on with what they're doing. But what's happening right now is things are rapidly falling apart. Look at the UK. Now, everyone's saying, oh, because of the Brexit, the UK is doing fantastically. They didn't leave the EU yet. They didn't even implement Article 50. They started the voting, but they haven't done anything yet. And what we're seeing out in the UK is things are breaking down. UK retail sales, they fell for a third month in January. And what they're seeing right now is inflation. Volume of goods sold in stores and online declined by 0.3%, following a 2.1% plunge in December. This is coming from the Office for National Statistics in the UK. And we're seeing inflation hit. We're seeing inflation hit here in the United States. And this is why families, individuals, are having a very rough time surviving right now. Because when the cost of living rises faster than your paycheck, year after year, or the cost of living rises faster than what the government is giving you, you have problems. People on food stamps, as the prices of food continually rise, their food stamp money stays the same. That doesn't increase with it until the government votes and says, okay, we're going to give you more. But most of the time, it is basically at one level. And if you were buying, let's say, this package of cookies or meat or whatever it is at a certain amount, and it just gone up $2, $3, $4, $5, well, guess what? You have to purchase less now. And they're finding it very difficult to survive. And since 1913, the US dollar has lost more than 98% of its value. Now, if our paychecks were increasing faster than inflation, this wouldn't be a problem. Now, in the beginning of the system back in 1971, when inflation hit, because what happened was we came off the gold standard, there was a lot of dollars out in circulation, and we had this huge amount of inflation. Interest rates were very high. They readjusted wages. We're at the end stage of the system right now. That's not going to work. And what we're seeing is that we're seeing price increases on food, margarine, up 63.6%. Uncooked ground beef, up 46.3%. Prescription drugs, up 43.5%. Rice, pasta, cornmeal, up 40%. Bread, up 38%. What we're seeing is we're seeing inflation hit right now. The other thing we're seeing is that Americans, they're not really refinancing their homes like they used to. It has fallen to the lowest level since 2009. Now, a lot of people refinanced their homes. They took the money and they used that money. Today, we're not seeing this. And if you remember, we also saw a slowdown in mortgage refinancing just before the great financial crisis of 2008. And we can see that mortgage applications overall, well, they're down 31% from where they were a year ago. That tells you something. Now, we've been tracking auto sales, and we can see right now that automobile manufacturers, they've been channel stuffing a lot of the lots. And remember, when they channel stuff a lot, that is considered a sale, not when you sell it to an individual, but when the dealership receives the automobile. And we can see with the low interest rates and perpetual loosening of auto lending standards, we see that a lot of people went in and they purchased their cars. They traded in their old leases. They got a little bit better cars, more expensive. And with rates on the rise right now and a flood of lease returns driving down used car prices, which pushed auto sales to record highs over the past several months, well, it looks like things are now changing course. Now, in the past, we talked about delinquencies, and what we're seeing right now is that there's a rise in delinquencies. And delinquency rates, they're soaring to the highest level since 2009, 2010. Looking at GM subprime data going back to 2001 implies that historical spikes in 2-month delinquency rates is fairly decent indicator that all is not well. And when we look at this, we can see starting in July of 2012, 61 plus day delinquency rates, they have lasted longer than they did in the Great Recession. And what we're seeing from the Financial Times, which pointed out it's not just subprime borrowers that are having problems making their monthly auto payments. It is other individuals. According to the data pulled from TransUnion, more than 1 million U.S. auto borrowers, subprime and otherwise, were behind on their payments in the fourth quarter of 2016. So we are headed into a complete disaster. And what the funny thing about this is what we saw to the lead up to 2008. So we're seeing a lot of the same exact things, which means things are not better at all. Now, another indicator that shows that we're on the same exact path of 2008 is that total U.S. household debt jumped in the fourth quarter. Now, this was driven by the increase of credit card debt, auto, and student loans, which is very interesting. And what we're seeing right now is that debt level, it's almost as high as it was in 2008. Actually, after this quarter, most likely we'll be at the same exact level. That's how fast it's rising because people are using credit to survive. People have been sucked into the auto loan market and purchased new cars. They brought in subprime people. You have to remember how the central bankers work. They need more and more debt out there. That's why they love it. This is why the corporate media reports on it when they say, wow, debt is rising fast. Auto sales are incredible because people don't buy cars with cash anymore. It's all loans. People don't buy homes with cash anymore. It's all loans. The majority of the people that do shopping, they don't use cash. They use credit. And they love this. This is how they analyze what's going on. It's great for them, bad for the economy. And what we're seeing right now is that things are rapidly falling apart. Remember, the U.S. government admitted to fabricating student loan default data, so it's a lot worse than they were even reporting. Of course, they said it was a glitch. Caterpillar. Now, we've been tracking Caterpillar, and during the Great Recession, they had about 19 months of declining sales. Well, we are already in 50 consecutive months of declining sales, which is now 2.5 times longer than it was in 2008. How are we in this recovery? We're not. It is a complete illusion. Now, out in Kyrgyzstan, we see the central bank governor out there. They want every citizen to own at least 100 grams of gold. He said the bank has sold around 140 kilos of gold bullion to the domestic population already. They're saying that this is going to protect the people from what is coming. They don't want people to hold fiat currency. They rather have people hold gold. It's an insurance policy. And we can see that many countries around the world are doing this, except here in the United States, because we've been brainwashed to think that you shouldn't own gold. Actually, fund managers now, they are looking to purchase gold, which is going to increase the demand for gold. People are realizing that the economy is starting to really fall apart and deteriorate. Actually, many people are looking at the economy, looking past the illusion, and what they're seeing is that this economy is a complete mess. It was completely made up. And we've been looking at this and tracking this, and we can see right now that this is exactly what is happening. It is a complete mess. It's never recovered. The only thing they did was pump it up. And they pumped it up so high just so Obama can get out of the White House. And the next person in will let them worry about it. This is how this works. This is why they've already started creating the narrative that things are going to rapidly deteriorate. And this is why you need to get prepared. Don't listen to everyone else that thinks that everything is fine. They're not looking at what is really happening. Just like those individuals that were looking at the subprime securities, and they looked inside and they went from name to name to name and saying, okay, default, subprime person, default. This is garbage. But guess what? Everyone else said, no, they're AAA. What are you talking about? We're looking at the economic indicators. We're seeing manipulated unemployment. We're seeing manipulated GDP. We're seeing manipulated retail sales numbers. We're seeing corporate defaults. We're seeing the auto delinquency rate moving up. We see that the student loan default rate was completely manipulated to convince everyone that everything was fine. When we look at all of this, what do we see? We see that this was based on an illusion. And when we look, we could see that everything was created to convince the population, the world, that everything was fine. Just like it was in 2008 and going back in time in history. They do this on purpose to keep you in the dark, to play their games. And everyone needs to be ready and prepared for what is coming. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.